Hey everyone, it's me, Mother Horror, and my host, Seth Humble, which I was just learning the other day that it's not Seth Humble with an H, it's a silent H, it's Seth Humble. But
You
that
got
kind
it.
of screws up our Hartman and Humble thing, so.
We'll stick with it. You keep the H in there. You deserve it.
This is our last read-along chat from the third book that we've been enjoying together. And our special guest tonight is Laird Barron. Hi, Laird.
Hey, folks, how you guys doing?
Good evening.
Good
I just
evening.
learned that it's Umble too. I probably should have known that this whole time, but I will not. But now I will not forget.
It's sort of like the scandalous TikTok thing that everybody just learned about Lindsay Lohan, which everyone's been saying Lindsay Lohan, and it's Lindsay Lohan.
And
So,
we probably will continue to. So,
uh-huh.
so Seth Humble, sorry.
Sorry.
Right. I have decided to change my name due to popular culture.
That's right.
Congratulations.
We're also celebrating Laird's birthday, so a big cheers to Laird's big birthday today.
Thank you very much.
Every time we say the word Coleridge, we have to take a drink.
Uh-oh.
I'm going to intentionally make it to where we run out of booze fast.
Welcome to all of our guests. I think Greg wants to be the first. He was first to wish Laird a happy birthday, so you win, Greg.
Thank you, Greg.
Greg gets it.
Seth, kick us off with some book discussion.
Of course. So we are here to discuss the third book in the Isaiah Coleridge saga, so far as it is. We know that Laird has talked to us a little bit about Isaiah having a role in future writings, but we come to this point of our relationship with Isaiah with a series of events that's led us here, especially the events of the previous book with the Croatoan. And we pick off, I wanted to talk to you, Laird, about this. So initially the book begins with, for spoiler alert, a large sum of money, which we might think is some cursed cash, which is a wonderful trope that you find in a lot of thrillers. And I wanted you to talk about that a little bit. So the money is from, I guess I'll actually let you say it. So from the second book, they find this money from
Croatoan, his stash, but where he got it is, of interest. Essentially a train. I don't know if it was really a money train, but an eccentric industrialist owned the train, like a private train, many years ago, and it went missing, and there was money on it. So the idea is possibly this is part of that hoard, and there may be more. Which, of course, I like sort of having an ongoing side mystery. Sometimes they're wrapped up in the novels, but other times there's something that kind of carries, into the next. Or just maybe even just left hanging there for a while, that are not necessarily an overarching plot, but are just little mysteries of the universe, so to speak. And yeah, the idea of the cursed money, certainly this is just part of a proud tradition. I mean, one of the most obvious ones in crime I could think of is like A Simple Plan.
Yeah.
And right, it doesn't crime, especially like noir, can often, noir and mystery and thrillers, they could be about many things. Crime, though, is almost always about money. Not always, but very frequently it's about money or some kind of tangible material gain. That seems to be sort of a hardcore component of a lot of crime. And another thing about crime is, even though you can argue that someone is forced into by circumstance, or maybe as a victim of circumstance, they wouldn't have robbed that bank if their kid didn't have cancer, something extreme. But generally, it's a choice. A lot of time, crime can be arguably, no, if you hadn't committed the crime, then you wouldn't have to do the time or be running on the run. Where noir could just be, you're walking down the street, mind your own business, and you are a victim of, a victim of the universe. And not to say that crime can't go from that point of view too, that that the crime happens to you, but a lot of times crime is really about people trying to hide the money, get the money, figure out how to divest themselves from blame for the money, et cetera, and so forth. And so this idea of cursed money was certainly one of the elements that I sort of wanted to bring in there, but not cursed money, cursed treasure, which goes all the way back to folklore,
right?
Germanic sagas and things like that. Siegfried trying to get the dwarves cursed gold, and how it always just, there's a couple things that are cursed that go back to, ancient times, which is love gone wrong and money, gold.
Right. It's one of the things. So I especially liked about that Lionel and Isaiah are literally having this metatextual conversation about, hey, so you think this is like cursed money? We should probably burn it because it's going to come back to bite us in the ass. I really enjoyed that conversation that they're having while they're, deciding what they need to do with it. Isaiah, who is, of course, obsessed with folklore, which I want to come back to in a bit about he and his relationship with Meg, but his great love of mythology. And it reminded me when I was reading that section about the section from the Maltese Falcon, where they ask, Marlowe, they could ask, what is it that you're holding in your hand when he's got the falcon, and he says the stuff that dreams are made of. Right. And I thought about it when I was reading this, and I'm like, this is the stuff nightmares are made of, like the money from this, killing machine that we now have. We don't know what to do with it, and it could possibly ruin everything.
Right.
So I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed. You said in the first couple of chapters, there's this really interesting. It's not so much a setup, because you've already set it. You've set up the universe. You set up the antagonist, the protagonist. All of that's clear, but you start to, not for the first time, because you do it a little bit in the first book with the headaches, especially when Isaiah goes to Detroit and everything starts to culminate in what starts to feel like the cracks in the veneer.
Mm-hmm.
But in the beginning of the book, you start really breaking down this mythological strongman, starting to say, like, I've been through it all, and now all of it has come to start to take the rest of me. And so I wanted to ask you about, what is it for you? Why is it important for us to begin to break down Isaiah into more human terms with this pain and suffering that becomes so much more evident than in the first two books?
Well, first of all, let me duck back to the thing about the money. I just have one little thing to add to that, is that the reason that I, if it's not even apparent, but it's just something I was thinking about. One of the reasons I had them have that conversation is because they're kind of they're sort of paradoxical in their viewpoints. On one hand, they're both pretty straightforward and not superstitious, and yet it's more that they won't admit that they are, at least consistently. But they're afraid of the money partially because the curse thing is sort of a joke, like haha, but it's not meta in the sense that, look, we've read our crime novels and we know that money is cursed. It's more that they literally do think, is there some kind of taint to this money? Because it's literally blood money, and from the most horrible, as you said, the killing machine. But the killing part isn't what bothers them. It's just the quality of the person or thing even. You kind of wonder just how human the Croatoan really is, functionally. And so, right. And then also, where did it come from? Who else is looking for it? So there was a lot going on with that. But as far as breaking Coleridge down, there's a bunch of things going on there. And for me, maybe the most important thing is that on one hand, these are beach reads, these are commercial. On the other hand, though, within that sort of mandate that I had, I wanted there to be some sort of consequence that you don't always see. I shouldn't say you seldom see, but you don't always see in episodic serial commercial fiction. Things do happen. There are exceptions, like the Matthew Scudder stuff. There's definitely, a change. I haven't read all the Raylan stuff, but I think Raylan probably goes through changes. So some of the better fiction does, if it goes on for a while, does tackle what happens to the hero in future books. Is there any kind of consequence? But I certainly wanted there to be not necessarily a character arc, because I don't actually think I always enjoy the character arc, but I like revelation, and I like just consequences catching up with people. That I think that's a useful thing. I was on another show recently, and we were talking. Actually, this was during a private conversation with somebody, but we were talking about tension in a TV series or a series of books. And it's not really that tense unless it's the last book, the last story of a Coleridge saga, because you know he's not going to die. I mean, there's going to be more books. However, that doesn't mean that you can't take things away. That also doesn't mean that he can't win sometimes. And it certainly doesn't mean that secondary characters can't be removed. The quickest way to raise tension is to have two characters, side characters that people love or hate, go at it or be in mortal danger. There is no guarantee that I'm not going to kill Bello or Robard or one of these other characters. I wouldn't hesitate to. It's just that, it's just a matter of if that fits the story. So we were talking about that. And the other thing that, I've noted about tension in crime is if you look at other genres, there's no requirement to put someone in mortal danger in a romantic comedy series or even a lot of dramas. There'll be the occasional death in a drama, but that's like somebody had a heart attack or somebody committed suicide or maybe somebody gets shot. Who shot JR, right? But you don't go through every episode going, who's going to live or die like Game of Thrones. And you don't need to. And you're still like, oh, is Sally going to get into, MIT, or is she going to be doomed to scrub floors the rest of her life? Right? So there's really so to me, the only reason to show, so I'm talking to the screenwriter and we were talking about, so then why have Coleridge or Jack Reach or whomever get into the life or death situations periodically? And of course, I have Coleridge get into them less frequently because I'm more of a slow burn. But I said because sometimes the fans, especially when you're writing commercial fiction, they want to see that Act 1 giant fist get made and get smacked right in the nose of that little prick who deserves it.
Yeah.
Or the dog abuser, the pimp, the whomever, right? The smarmy ex-cop who wants to run roughshod everybody. They want to see the big stick come out and get applied liberally to that guy's head because this is a fantasy. This is something I've said in every interview, every time I've talked about Coleridge is that it is a fantasy. It is not reality. I just use reality to maybe, hopefully like somebody like Scorsese or Refn or somebody where it's like, yeah, this is fantasy, this is pulp, but here's a little dose of realism to kind of, up the stakes and to help immerse you in it more so than you might have been if you're just like, look, those guns never run out of bullets. I turned off an action show the other night because the guy, and I'm no gun, no purist, I don't care about details, but the guy fired a little semi-automatic pistol like 90 times, like literally just kept firing. And I went, at least John Wick occasionally he'll, that's the whole point of really good action films is like out of bullets, throws the pistol, grabs that guy's gun. It's acknowledged.
Right.
And Coleridge just acknowledges a little bit more.
Right. And just adding on to that, what's so much fun about the John Wick action sequences is that the reloading and the rechanging of weapons, that's the beat, not the action sequence, right? Because the beat is what's breaking everything along. And you're like, oh, what's he going to do with that pencil? What's he going to do with a sword? Right.
No, but Pitch Dark, or not Pitch Dark, but the Vin Diesel series, I think the guy, Riddick.
Oh, right.
Kind of had some of that going for it too. For as schlocky an action series as that is, the attention paid to, and he's superhuman, so that you can go along with some of the things that he does. But there's an attention to detail on that I think is overlooked. I should probably write something about that because it's a B minus series, right? In most respects,
right.
And what he does can't be done by a normal human, but within the framework of the rules of that universe, what he does actually there's a lot of attention there to detail and to physics and, his environment and all that. And I find that's in the tradition of the best action movies.
I think what you said about a simple plan, going back to you drawing a parallel to that is for the reader, if we see like relationships being developed, that's the potential for a betrayal too, which I think with the consequences that you've been talking about, like people getting consequences in a book, like A Simple Plan, like it's all consequences and it's all blood money, and blood money always comes with consequences, like we know, and people selling each other out in weird situations and under duress. And I think like for readers that can be, well, I just read The Good Neighbors by Sarah Langan. And that whole thing is about consequences and how different people's reactions to a crime escalate the situation. And that seems to be, this trilogy is like an escalation from book 1 to book 3. And it seems like there's questions happening in the chat too. So I just want to remind everybody that we're going to get to those and keep asking your questions. Like, we can't wait to get into those as well.
Well, one last thing, because I realized what you just said actually plays into this whole thing about Coleridge is actually in some ways getting, he's not necessarily weaker, but he's becoming more vulnerable physically. And still, the typical, in the best, once again, the best tradition that I've, of crime and noir that I adhere to, he's, the average guy. This isn't literary stuff where a punch in the eye, oh my God, you broke your orbital bone, you're dead. No, this is, he's not going to get defeated by some punk at a bar. That's not, I'm not interested in writing that kind of a story about him. That's would be one of my contemporary horror stories where, somebody stabs you or punches you, you probably broke his hand, you broke your cheekbone. But what I was going to say is that Coleridge, in some ways, I do have a love of survival horror, which would be Alien, Resident Evil, if you talk about video games. And the idea is that sometimes you get bigger weapons, but then the threat's worse, right? Your weapon will become more powerful depending on what's around the corner. Like if you're in Silent Hill and you've been using a 2x4 with a nail in it to defeat the various enemies, you're like, oh, this sucks. I wish I had a gun. But after about 5 hours of playing and you come around a corner and there's a gun like lying on a shopping cart with some bullets, you're just like, oh God, no.
Yeah.
No, what's going to happen?
Yeah, you get a gun, the enemy is going to be worse.
Well, right. And so but there's another way to do this, is where this is why they call it survival, is that in some books, movies, and games, the idea is that you have a finite amount of resources. You better husband those because all you're going to get. And so with Coleridge, in some ways, even though this is not survival horror, he's with this last book, he's getting much closer to the old Leech end of the universe, of my universe. And so my idea of his resource, being a resource management situation, is that, he's probably gaining friends and money, those types of tangible material resources, but he's probably, sharpening his, his basically his procedural abilities. So in other words, he's getting cleverer, but he's physically, something that he's relied on his entire life is the ability to, you don't really need to know as many martial arts. If you can just, when you swat someone, you can be imperfect in your combat arts if you have strength to make up for it. And his strength and his agility and his reflexes are diminishing. It's dividing him mentally because he has something wrong with his brain that seems to be not reconciled. So his threats are the threats are mounting against him. The danger's escalating, as they say in Roald Dahl's poem. The danger keeps on growing, and the rowers keep on rowing, but there's no way to tell which way they're going. It could be hell. The fires of hell are glowing. He's weaker physically as it goes along. So something that he's relied upon his entire life. He's in his mid-40s now, and he's probably been doing. He's been a brute since he was a teenager. Defending himself. So for 30 years, he's been reliant upon. Not only is he stronger than most people, but he has this weird superhuman ability that he can call upon that comes and goes. That actually, flip a car kind of thing. But this all seems to be in danger, and I really like that, because now what's he going to do? And he's going to have to compensate for that. And so that's another reason I've done it. It's just for the fun of watching him squirm as things get bad.
Right. And so you said something about, or you're talking about, in-world mythologies that you're creating, right? And what's really interesting to me, and I've been waiting to ask this. I was going to ask it last time, but I waited for this time. Is Meg Isaiah's oracle? Is she the oracle at Delphi? Or not even Delphi, but is she the oracle? Because she's always talking to him about these dreams, who you are, your destiny. And she is so oracle-like. And what's really interesting is that at the end of the book, she specifically in the final chapter, Isaiah says, Meg didn't know anything about this. And it's the last thing that we have Isaiah say about Meg in that moment, or at least in this series of books. And I have been waiting to ask, is Meg this oracle that seems to understand the destiny of this tragic hero, and yet she still chooses to engage with it?
I think initially she's supposed to be Megara and he's Hercules.
Right.
But I won't say I abandoned that, but I expanded upon that really quickly, even while I was, editing the first book, because I just thought, that's too, I don't mind that as being a touchstone, but I kind of wanted to keep it simple because I wanted it to be as commercial as possible. But I soon figured out that you tried. Old Homer said, you tried. So yeah, in a sense, but I'm going to refer people to the Sons of Anarchy, which is actually a pretty darn good B TV series. But one thing that they did, and I took a cue from this artistically, is that whether or not it becomes apparent to a viewer right away, it should soon, is that that's based on Hamlet, big time.
Right.
For anybody, the Jax's character is obviously Hamlet, and his father, the ghost, talks to him through a manuscript, and his uncle and his mom get together, and they've had something to do with daddy dying, probably killed him, and on, right? Okay, so that's easy, right? That we were talking about like multiple universes and Easter eggs. It's really easy to do the obvious things. There was a sheriff in Derry who shot a Saint Bernard. That's the easy,
right?
Old Leech, putting in the symbols of Old Leech here and there. That's the easy stuff. Likewise, going, all right, my novel's going to be, or my character's arc's going to be, based upon or influenced by the 12 Labors of Hercules or Beowulf or whatever. That's all really, and then obviously the different characters correspond. And in Sons of Anarchy, it's Hamlet. But what they did that I thought was fascinating is it's not a one-for-one adaptation of it. It's not easy. What they do is they have it's a basic framework that they hang this contemporary story on, but then it goes all over the place, and good luck, like a little squirrel, chasing 3 or 4 nuts around there, blowing around a windstorm, trying to figure out which one to get, because some of them are dead ends. And so I picked that up. I said, all right, yeah, there's Beowulf and Siegfried and Sigurd, and there's, Achilles and Odysseus, and etc. Right? But why, or Heathcliff even? But why? It doesn't need to be one-to-one. So basically, Meg does sort of fulfill the role of a muse as much as she does an oracle, but it's not a conscious thing with her, and it's certainly not a one-to, like, there's no one-to-one. It's not like that's exactly what she is, but she's certainly her role is influenced by that kind of thinking. And I will say the reason that she engages with him, I feel like this is just hardcore noir. The Coleridge stuff, it's a strength, and it's also probably a commercial weakness, is that it's not firmly a crime series or mystery series or any one type of genre. It is literally a hybrid of many things. I think it is a bedrock noirish series with crime, but it's not. Black Mountain was more of a thriller,
right?
Like the Hannibal novels are more,
right.
They're thrillers. They're not pure detective or police novels or serial killer novels. They're various things, and
right.
So yeah, and so the bottom line is that when I was writing, these characters, I'm just looking and what I'm going to do with them. I'm just looking at, not being beholden to, well, I've got to keep it, in this one genre, going down this one path. I'm gonna deviate where it pleases me to do so, where I think it'll make, the people who stick with the books, I think they'll like it. But yeah.
Laird, sorry, Seth, did you have
No, I was gonna say if we can jump over, because that was the big question I've been wanting to ask since we started. So, but I'm happy for us to jump over.
I lost the reason, back to why though that's important, is Meg's reaction is important, is because one element of real life, actually, but the bad thing, as Mom said, is the bad thing about fiction is that it has to actually make sense and be consistent, unlike life. Is that people are, I don't use this word lightly, but we're literally slaves to our our situations a lot of the time. And so this is why people stay with bad people. This is why people don't make the right decisions. We fall into ruts, which is a real polite way of putting certain things. But there's like this gravity that's exerted in our lives. And it could be the gravity of your job. And I'm talking about literal gravity, like a gravity well, where I don't care how podunk and unfulfilling and terribly, the recompense for your job is, while you're in it, it sure does seem like the only thing that you can ever talk about when you come home, especially if it's bad. And yet the minute that and this could go on for years, right? But the minute that you get fired or you quit or the place burns down mysteriously and you don't have that job anymore, you don't even think about it. Like all of a sudden that job is no longer, it's in your rear view. You go, that crappy job I used to have. Same thing with relationships. People will be in these terrible relationships. And if they ever get out of it, right? And it seems like there's inescapable and their behaviors are set. And then they get out of it, and it's like they can't believe within a year or two, once they've healed a little bit and get some distance, they're like, I can't believe I was that kind of a person while I was with that other guy, gal, whomever.
Right.
And so all I'm trying to say about the situation with Meg and Coleridge, because I give this a lot of thought, she makes bad decisions. And it's not because she's a bad person, but she is a person.
Right.
And Coleridge offers a lot of things that are very positive, but I think it's as much she's a prisoner of just circumstance as much as she is, in other words, it's really hard to see past the event horizon when you're stuck behind it. I think it rapidly becomes, it's very difficult to even imagine what it's like to not be with someone, which to me is kind of I just got sad when you sat here thinking about that. So anyway, that's all I had on that.
What were we going to say, Sadie?
Well, I was just going to say that Laird mentioned that Coleridge was getting more vulnerable physically, but I also think that his relationships make him more vulnerable too towards the end. Like if you're this person that keeps everybody at a distance and you've got this like job where you're this hired thug and your relationships could potentially be used against you. So you just kind of move through life as like a ghost. As soon as you start making yourself known to people, like that's a threat, and so I just thought it was interesting that he has these relationships that, we've come to love these people. And obviously he is growing affectionate with these people. So it's a threat.
You're right.
To him.
I mean, he kind of acknowledges that too in the third couple points. You're 100% right. And he feels helpless about, but here's the thing is I don't go on and on about it in the book, but he does acknowledge it. I certainly feel it. But he feels like much as she's helpless, like she shouldn't be with this guy. She should find somebody that's not, he's not that he's evil. He'll do anything for her, but brings a lot of danger to her potentially.
And her kid.
And she doesn't, right. And she doesn't even know about 90% of the danger that he's right. But the point is, I don't think either one of them can really, as strong as they are, I don't think either one of them at this point can do anything about it.
Right. But Sadie, did we have questions in the chat? I know people are asking questions. I can't wait to see what they are.
We do. I did want to just highlight this from Greg. He said, it's also interesting how Isaiah lets himself get close to Devlin in this book. Real vulnerability there. So Greg's picking up on that. Here it is. Austin, question for Laird. What is a black kaleidoscope that a couple characters bring up in Worst Angels that is connected with Old Leech?
Okay, let's get into it.
Yeah, it's really interesting. The kaleidoscope, actually, if people stick around long enough for these order of the day, we've beaten the singularity, we've enslaved the artificial intelligences, the Harlan Ellison nightmare. I have no mouth, but I must scream. Yeah, there's one of my stories I talk about. There's a whole solar system, and each one of them has one or more of these god intelligences that have been exiled to them, and we just send them. Far future humans are not nice people. Well, are we now?
No.
We'll occasionally send them playthings. To keep them placated, we'll send them colony ship full of prisoners or whatever they can have their fun with. All Ellison's book, but the kaleidoscope, and I'm not going to say much about it, but just that it does. There are some probably opens more questions even, but you start to understand what the kaleidoscope is. The black kaleidoscope, as it has been described in my horror stories, is simply it's actually it's not necessarily a machine, but it's something that exists that we can tap into to look into the past, look into the future, and to maybe even punch holes through time and space physically to step somewhere else. But it's never been, this is intentional, but also just haven't gotten to it yet. It didn't seem important. It's never been fully, and probably never will be fully explained. But Toshi, the two doctors have talked about it. I've had other characters mention it in passing. It's almost a concept more than it is a piece of technology, although it can be sort of, if you build something that can tap into it, I could see a scientist calling it his black kaleidoscope. But it's as you can imagine, what's a kaleidoscope do? It's something you look into and you see fractured imagery. And in the case of my universe, you're looking at many little either pieces of our universe, at the dinosaurs, for example, or in the far future, or into alternate bubble universes.
Oh, that's a really cool concept.
All that to say, Austin, you'll need to stick around to figure out more about the black kaleidoscope. I love that.
Yeah, that's really cool. Greg has a question. Does Laird have a pretty firm idea of where a fourth Isaiah Coleridge would have gone?
I have a good idea where about the ninth one would have gone. This is something I discussed with the editor when she acquired Sarah Minnick, and I just want to give a shout out to her. She really, helped me with editing the books, and really a great experience working with her at Putnam. I feel like I said this back when I first did the first book with her and with her team, that no matter how many books I did or didn't do with them, that I became a much better writer just for that first book. Because it's a different kind of writing, it's a different kind of expectation. So I just want to give her a shout out. I really, and for her for taking a chance on the books, because they're not the easiest sell, for a company like Putnam, and she really, did a lot to get them out there. But would you rephrase the question again? What you wanted me to?
Oh yeah, for sure. Where of the fourth Isaiah Coleridge would have gone?
Right, where would it gone? So okay. So one of the first things we talked about was simply that, is this going to be, given interest, would it just go on forever till you face plant into your keyboard and they go, well, I guess we'll hire, Ace Atkins to keep it going, or what? And I said, no, I see it as being between 7 and 12, depending on what happens. And probably and then as time went on, I was like, yeah, I want to do 9. And I wanted it to be a complete arc. The end would be, he's in his 50s or 60s. So it would take place over about a 15, 20-year period. And one of the, here's the thing though, I'm not 100%, I'm not even 20% sure there won't be more, despite how it ended, despite the fact that there's not going to be any more with Putnam, at least in the near future. There's two things happening. One, there's going to be novellas released that are take place after the events of Worse Angels in this universe, and also in the fantasy universe. And I think, depending on what the interest in my writing is overall over the next few years, there easily could be a continuation of the series with another publisher or in a different format. But Coleridge and Lionel have a few more stories, that I want to tell a few more of their stories. But one of the things I was planning on doing, not necessarily with the fourth one, but I was going to do the Iliad and the Odyssey with Coleridge. Essentially, I want him to go back to Alaska. Essentially, something terrible happens in Alaska. A little Odessa kind of a situation, and they wipe out the mafia up there, and Coleridge and his father, and I don't want to get into why, but his father is involved, partially because of his secret sort of alphabet soup affiliation that he's got, government alphabet soup affiliation he's got going. And they go up with a small team, and they end up besieging a compound up in the Alaska wilderness, and it's very short. Like, it wouldn't be, obviously it only takes place over the course of a short period of time, but they literally go through the at least the framework of the the Iliad, and then obviously whatever happens, and then they have to get out of there, and that would be the Odyssey. And the Odyssey was envisioned as Coleridge and not doing well, physically hurt, him and his father maybe somebody else trapped in like the Alaska or Canadian wilderness trying to get back and not get killed on their, so it'd be like a wilderness adventure novel. And I don't see why I shouldn't do it at some point.
Absolutely, you should do
Yeah,
it.
you absolutely should.
I'll read the shit out of that.
Would combine a lot of your wheelhouses.
Yeah. Well, these novellas are going to give me a chance because I can't reveal anything, but there's some big news coming with those. And I just, they're, going to be like 20 to 30,000 words. And boy, when I was talking with someone about them, I said, well, they'll be very similar to the novels. It's just that I'll just trim a lot of the digressions and I'll have to only develop one side character. I won't be able to do all the stuff I can do, but they'll just be these like very lean, mean, straight to the point adventure stories that are going to get deeper and deeper, probably into the horrific. And then I do the fantasy, which I cannot wait to show people those because those are pretty weird and a lot of fun.
I think the novella for a long-standing series is a really smart move. I recently wrote an article about how I wish that people would kind of release a full-length novel in novelettes or novellas, just because like getting an epic like 600 to 700 page book is a little daunting for people who, have like a lot of stuff that they want to read. But when you get something that just kind of drops in at around 200, you can just like binge read that in like a couple of hours. And then you anticipate the next release. And it's just a really smart business angle. I think more publishers should do.
You're right. And I grew up reading paperback crime novels, right? Fantasy, I mean, everything. But that used to be the vehicle of choice would be that 30 to 50,000 word. I mean, probably closer to 40, but nonetheless, you can read them in an afternoon. I used to read paperback Westerns and crime novels and things like that, like one a day. So as a matter of fact, a lot of them probably were around 30,000. So I actually have a lot of, I don't think these days, I don't think a lot of the younger writers have probably had the pleasure of reading all of those. I grew up literally like it's ingrained in me. And so I feel like I could, if I'm going to do this, basically bring back for me the Coleridge and paperback novels from the 60s and 70s. Well, actually the 50s to the 70s. I think I'm uniquely positioned to do it just because, it's nothing I have to learn. I understand how they did it. So, obviously executions, we'll see if I can do a good job with it, but it doesn't daunt me at all. Like that's the novella form is actually my favorite form after all these years anyway. I feel like anything from 15,000 to 40,000 words, those have always been my favorite. And, you start talking, mid 20s to around 30, it's just like, absolutely, I can do anything in that range.
Right. To go back to so with that in mind, it reminds me of like the last author I can think who really tried that, but got overwhelmed due to the doorstopper novels of the time was Fred Saberhagen. Like Saberhagen was coming out with his Swords book. He came out with the Dracula tapes book, and it was just like boom, 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 boom.
The
Berserkers, right? All of that stuff, and he was dropping 2 books a year at one point, just one after the other.
Yeah, and that's what I'm gonna basically, obviously write novels and short stories too. But I'm going to see if I can't get to a point where I'm writing a couple of the Coleridge, wherever they're set. But basically, try to write a string of those, and then and they're all loosely. Those would like the novels. I would just treat them like the novels. They're just a slim, lean, mean version of them.
Yeah, no, that's a great idea, Laird. I definitely think so. Like, I hope more authors follow suit because, I mean, like John Taff did the Fearing novel and he put that out. And I was taken back to when Stephen King did The Green Mile, and I picked up these little chapter books at the grocery store. Like, that was an event, and if you want all of your readers to be on the same page at the same time, like going through a book and you can't go any further, like with the story until the next one comes out. I think that it's something that like is super, super like fan based because everyone can enjoy them together, like a franchise.
I think you're totally right. I hadn't even really been deeply thinking about it in that way, but people that I'm talking to do. And it's just that, and the important thing for me is to be able to, because I'm a slow writer, is to be something that I can tackle and isn't tackling me. And I will say this: whenever I'm writing Coleridge, no matter what universe it is, I'm chuckling. No matter Jessica M, my SO, will come in and go, "Is everything okay?" But she doesn't bother anymore. She goes, "Oh, you're writing Coleridge in there, weren't you?" Because I'm writing like 6 projects at one time right now, and they're obviously not all Coleridge. But she can tell when I'm writing him because I'm in there laughing, not at him, but like at the side characters and stuff. And one last thing, the Saberhagen. It's funny you brought that up because I was on a show the other day and we were talking about Rex, and I said essentially Rex is a world annihilator in his ultimate form. You don't always see him like this, but in his ultimate far future form, yeah, he goes around. He's like a tank, like, right, but he's much more powerful than that because a lot of his physiology and armament actually exists in a quantum, like a subatomic state, that he can bring it out of a pocket dimension and literally be the size of a battleship. But I have said more than once that, yeah, normally he's not walking around with that kind of armament. He has to kind of like, build himself up, and it takes a certain amount of time. He can't just do it instantly. So he has to make do with a flamethrower breath and a rocket launcher. But he could manifest literally the firepower to destroy a planet, to glass a planet. And when I was describing it, I just said, yeah, it's like Fred Saberhagen's Berserker series, because the Berserkers could be disguised as all kinds of things.
Yeah.
Right. It could be a potted, well, I don't know if it could be a potted plant, but that little old man, that's in a coma could go and do it Transformer style and be a world ender. And I always, that kind of stuck with me.
I was talking with one of my friends about, so we were talking about your work, and I said, yeah, the Croning is great and all these things. I said, and then there's Rex. And the guy goes, well, what's Rex? And I go, well, imagine if Laird Barron was doing Jack Kirby from the 1970s. Like it just feels like, you know what? Anything's possible, and this fucking dog can do whatever it wants. Like,
right.
It's amazing.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, that's thank you for the compliment. But Kirby, obviously, I grew up reading Kirby, right? Kirby, looking at visual people, Kirby and Frazetta.
Yep.
These days, Corbin. Matter of fact, when I was talking about some of the exploits of Coleridge and various other characters in my fantasy setting, I was like, yeah, Corbin would be like, I actually have somebody I'm getting ready to trot out a new character. His name's Corbin Barrow. And part of that's because Richard Corbin is such a huge influence. Like my stuff isn't anything like his or Frazetta's or anybody else, but it's, those are people, Gene Wolfe, those are people that are in the back of my mind when I'm writing. So Saberhagen. So
right. It feels like in the Croning, feels like a Frank Frazetta series of portraits.
There's a little bit, sure.
So, anyway, not to get too much onto your other work, because we are here for Worse Angels.
Well, there is one last question.
Go ahead.
In the chat that we could hit before we're done. Paul Preston says, are there stories out there or forthcoming about Ryoko? Did I say that right? And Campbell. I was very intrigued when Beasley told Isaiah about exceptions in jungles and deserts and godforsaken tropical murder nests.
Possibly. I actually, there's 2 things. One, you can find a story called, not to be confused with the collection, there's a story called Swift to Chase that will be in my next collection. And it's about Jessica Mace, and she goes on a mission for the doctors. So they're in that. So if you want to hunt that down or wait till the collection, you can read about them in that. I don't know what I'm going to do with them, as 80-something-year-old dudes in the future. I'm not sure. We may be at the end of the road for them, but not 100%. Maybe I'll do the demise of the doctors. But I have thought long and hard about doing an actual novel based on the events from the forest, the events that preceded the forest, where they went on that expedition into the, over there in Bangladesh, and they were in that that terrifying swamp. I actually thought about writing that as a novel, like actually doing that. But the other thing I've thought about is you might see the doctors again, because I'm probably going to write a novel about Bello, the FBI agent, because he's a consultant now, and it's kind of mysterious whomever he's working for. It's sort of a mysterious organization, and I'm thinking that Bello may have to meet Michelle Mock. That may be something that he has to do. So we'll see.
Right. I think you mentioned that Bello spends like 3 weeks in retirement, and then he picks up consultancy because he's so bored, and he's just like, I got to get back in the game somehow.
And I think that his organization may, the thing is, I've set up the doctors for years now, almost 15 years now, as having been involved at high level. The governments of the world have involved them in various things over the years. So I've left myself a lot of room if I want to do something like that, I can.
Let's do it. If you're doing 6 projects, what's a 7th?
That's right. A 7th.
Never leave your writing cave.
I don't really. You can't. I'm actually, my foot's chained to the floor.
You do look a little translucent. There actually did get another question to drop in, so let's try to answer it. So Austin asks, can you speak more to your being a slower writer? Is it due to a number of projects? Are you revising a lot as you go? Just curious. I'm a slower writer as well, so it's nice to know I'm not alone.
Never alone, Austin. I interrupted you. I'm sorry, please.
Oh, no, I was just chatting.
Oh, okay. I'm slow just because I'm slow. I don't type. I'm a 2-finger, click, click, click. But that actually, it doesn't really matter, because I would just end up, if I were a, 80 words a minute guy, I would just delete, 75 of those words 15 minutes later. This one thing that Jessica, she really had to get used to this. She's unflappable now, but I write under deadline a lot of the time, because this is just what happens. And like, here comes the deadline. And she'll go, well, how many words you get done today? Because we hear this every day. I only got 300 words today, or I got 3,000, whatever. She'll go, how many did you delete today? Because that's typically what I do. It's not that I don't write. Obviously I do, but I'll write a huge chunk and then start editing as I'm
You're an immediate editor.
I edit every single line. By the time, and you wouldn't know it from all my typos and infelicities of continuity and whatnot, but generally speaking, I write a story 5-6 times before it ever. So if you read like a 10,000 word story for me, it was probably 40 or 50,000 words. If you count all the times I deleted most of it and rewrote it, and then kind of gnashed my teeth over it. And the bad thing about being a perfectionist is that it doesn't seem much more perfect. It's just
right.
So in other words, I don't know if it even helps. It's just what I go through to write. For me, writing is literally,
painful.
Yeah. Like when the Coleridge stuff is the exception. I can sit down and I could write a Coleridge, novel when I finally get down to doing it, like in 4 or 5 months, where the Croning or something like that, oh my God, years, stories, it's nothing for me to spend 2 months on a 6,000 word story. And it's, as a professional writer, that's really tough. I should be able to, I can sell stories about as fast as I can write them. So if I could write a lot more stories, I'd be doing a lot better. But so I write really slowly. It has nothing to do with the amount of projects, so that certainly doesn't help. It's just this process that I have to go through. And one of the reasons that I'm a slow writer is that I'll get to points in the story and I'll go, this is not correct. But writing it, like tackling it, punching, it's like trying to batter my way through it. It doesn't work. I've tried that. I've said, okay, I'm just going to keep writing right through the roadblock. And I'm not talking about get to a point like, okay, what would he say here? Okay, put an X pin in it and come back. I'm talking about like just dead ends. And I've tried writing through them. And what happens is I end up deleting almost everything that I write. So one of the reasons I have 6 projects going is because when I get to dead ends in something, I set it aside. And what happens is I'll be walking the dog or I'll be dreaming and I'll wake up and go, I just have to let it seep. It's almost like water coming through a stone. It just seeps through. You can yell at that rock all you want, but the drip, it'll fill the bucket when it fills the bucket.
Yeah.
And that's how my writing is. I can shout at it, scream at it, beg it. I can try to trick myself. And with the exceptions of boom, the story just arrives full of, I did write a story recently, that Coleridge story. Once again, it's Coleridge, that fantasy story, 6,000 words. I wrote it like in 10 days, just cranked it out. And Stephen Graham Jones is sitting back there. If he happens to hear this, going 10 days, eh? Yeah, okay, buddy. That was like 4 hours. I did that on my.
Right.
I did that on my. I took the rest of the day off and wrote that story. But for me, that's lightning. And but generally speaking, no, we're talking weeks and weeks for a story, and that's just because it comes only at the rate that it wants to come.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's what it is. A lot of times I get to where, I could finish it, but it isn't right. It just isn't right. I could sell it. People wouldn't know the difference. They'd be like, they either like it or they wouldn't, but they wouldn't be obsessing over it. They would just, it's a story. But for me, it has to be good. So I don't use the word good. I just say it has to be right. It has to be what that little muse, the whip, she's got the whip and she's like, okay, I'll put it down. You're done.
Awesome. I
Right.
also do feel super validated that you two-finger type, because I have tried to learn it the right way, and it's just like I've ruined myself. My fingers are trained to type the way I type. I can actually type pretty fast without it, but my kids make fun of me. Like, I'll be sitting there typing something really fast, and they'll like film me out of the corner and be like, "Look this is what you look like." He's like, boop,
Hunting and pecking all over the place.
I don't hunt anymore. I know where they all are.
But I will say this, obviously there are exceptions. And if you have a deadline, then getting something done is paramount, right? You got to get it done. But just in general, going down the bunny trail as a writer, it does not matter how fast you type or how much stuff you get done. You need to get stuff done that makes you feel fulfilled and is the best that you can do and gives you the best chance. So it doesn't matter whether you write. Somebody asked me, they said, before you became a full-time writer, what was your ritual? And I said, I don't believe in rituals. I do believe in routines. And the difference just being that I don't have to sit in a certain chair at a certain time facing south. But routine would be every day I turn that, no matter how tired I am, when I got home from my job, I would open up a Word doc, and that thing stays open, whether it's a blinking cursor and I get nothing done until I go to bed, or whether I write 500 words. And I said, the only difference between me today and me before I was able to make the transition is that I get a lot more 500-word days than I used to. But all that matters in the long run over time is that you accumulate. And I told somebody, I said, if you just did 25, 50 words a day, right? 5 days a week, you'll be surprised. Within a couple of years, you actually have a 80,000 word manuscript. Because I did the math on this. It takes at 50 words a day, even 100 words, I guess 100 words a day. It takes about 2 years to an 80,000 word manuscript if you're working 5 days a week, taking holidays off and stuff.
Yeah.
So
at that pace, you're outpacing George R. Martin and Patrick Rothfuss at the moment.
Well, the only point I was making is I think people really, this is close advice I really want to give. I think people get really hung up with when they're told they got to write every day.
Yeah.
Because I think first of all, that's not necessarily true, but I do think there is value in writing frequently, doing anything that you want to be better at and stay good at consistently, which means as often as you can. Doesn't necessarily mean every day. It just means whatever if you can write once a month, once a year, and you can get everything accomplished you need to, who cares? That's great. But most human beings, there's been studies done on this, whatever the activity is, motor memory, memory, there's at least some sort of lower threshold where you should be, doing this at some frequency. But the bottom line is that the other misconception I feel like people have about this is that they place this weird abstract value. It's an abstract value, but they try to make an actual concrete value on, well, if you don't write X amount of words per day, it wasn't really writing.
Right.
Like, and some people will say this, but some people have it in their head. I know they do because they've confessed it. They'll say, well, but I only got 100 words, or only got 800 words, or whatever it was. I'm like, no, 1 word, 5, 100.
Yeah.
It doesn't, it really, except for specific circumstances where your editor's going, where's the thing? And then I'm like, 1,500 words a day. Yes, ma'am. I'm face plant on the keyboard when I'm done. 100 words a day. I didn't do anything for 3 days. I just stare. I've done this so many times. I just stare at a blank screen or with just rewrite this paragraph. Not because I'm procrastinating. That's a whole different issue. I know all about that. But no, it's as long as you're grappling with it. As long as you're grappling with it, I don't care how many words or how few. just grapple with it, and it will take care of itself.
Right.
That sounds like really good advice, because I mean, we were just talking about that on Twitter the other day about how people's lives are not supposed to be formulaic and cookie cutter, because a one size fits all doesn't work for a lot of people, especially given just circumstances that we're all in different seasons of life too. I mean, you know, tell me like 20 years ago, like, you know, what I'm supposed to be doing. And I had two tiny kids, you know, I couldn't do anything, but now my kids are all like kind of grown and I'm doing like a ton of stuff.
I
So
got to
it's
put that
like,
in a story. I had two tiny children. I couldn't do anything. I mean, anything.
I literally couldn't do
Right.
anything. So
No,
yeah, this has been really cool. Like, I feel really honored that you joined us on every single book. Like, that's a huge thing. I mean, I don't know if like you know how important that is, but it's really important that you did that. It's really cool.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you for saying that. But I enjoy talking to you and the audience, and first of all, I appreciate you guys doing this, and also I appreciate everybody who joined in and asked questions or read the book, or sort of just came along for the ride. I do appreciate that, and of course, I want to talk to be here for everybody.
Yeah, and it's really serendipitous too, the timing, and that you're working on more Coleridge stuff, and we can sit back and kind of wait for you to have fun announcements, and we'll be all right here fresh, having read the entire trilogy. So it's really exciting.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Coleridge has become pretty darn important to me, but I say Coleridge, I mean that entire universe with all the side characters and stuff. But it's sort of allowed me to do a certain type of writing that I don't always allow myself to do. And so I don't even really plan on changing it all that much, even though, I might be writing, more for myself with these shorter ones. But I'm really looking forward to it. It's something, because I'm still writing a bunch of other stuff. And I don't know, I almost feel like it's just sort of a relief to sit down with those guys, even though a lot of times I'm crying when I'm writing some of the stuff that happens to them. It's I don't know. It's almost there's sort of this sense that when I'm writing about those characters, that cast of characters, that I'm able to just sort of kind of just relax and pay homage to the stuff that got me through when I was a kid, the pulp and the lit, and kind of in some way try to pay that forward, because write those kinds of stories, which a lot of my writing isn't. A lot of my writing is, it's different, as anybody who's read all of it will know. But these stories really are, I hesitate to say fun, but they are in a way. They're in a way that pulp should be. That, okay, this is a fantasy, and let's go for this adventure. And I really value that, because even though it's a huge part of what I'm doing, and it's important to me, financially, like as a working writer, them selling is important. I honestly think that if I were back to just working, a different day job, and I were just writing, that one story a year, it would definitely probably be Coleridge at this point.
But who can detract when a person falls in love? And you, sir, have fallen in love. And that's wonderful.
Yeah, and that's a good note to leave on too. And how awesome that you celebrated with us to end your birthday. Like, that's really exciting.
How special.
How special.
Yeah, I'm quite happy to do it.
Well, thank you. And we hope you had a happy birthday, and we will probably be chatting with you again, just to promote these other works that you have coming down the line for us.
Cannot wait.
It's
cool.
It's real. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Nope, the connection's just weird. No, thank you guys very much. This is actually, I don't celebrate holidays really that much. Jessica's birthday, I celebrate that. I don't really celebrate mine traditionally, so this is really a cool way to have done it. So I appreciate you guys.
Yeah, that's cool. Thanks everyone in the chat for hanging out with us. Thank you so much for joining Seth and I on this read along. It just kind of like manifested itself, and we were like, hey, who wants to read this with us? And gosh, there was a lot of you. So we're going to leave that group chat open. That way, when more things come along that have to do with it, we can just see if anybody wants to join in, and we'll just leave that group chat on Goodreads Open. So thanks, everyone. Thank you, Laird. Thank you,
Yeah,
Seth, for
of course.
hosting. Yeah.
Anytime, every time. Thank you all.
Have a good night, everyone.
Same to you guys. Have a good rest of your week.
You too. Okay,
All
I'm going
right.
to end that.